There's nothing special about these houses behind me. They're ordinary corporation houses, 3 bedrooms, sitting room, dining room cum kitchen, bathroom, lavatory, gardens back in front. You see them everywhere. Whole towns have been built of them in the last 30, 40 years. They've aroused the admiration of many people from other countries. And there's nothing special about them, as I said, but they symbolise the finest thing that Ireland has ever done. The story about them may never be told adequately, especially the human element involved in it. But at this moment of our housing history, a moment of pause and assessment, we can catch a glimpse of that story so far as it's gone. Possibly the best informed man in Ireland on this subject is with me now, Mr. Colm O'Doherty of the Department of Local Government, head of the National Building Agency. To begin with, could you give us an idea of the number of houses that have been built since the campaign began?
Well, at the moment, there are about 700,000 houses in the country. The biggest impact into this programme of building came since 1948. Since that year, the local authorities, by which I mean the corporations, county councils, the urban district councils, they have built some 60,000 houses since 1948. Private enterprise in the same period, that's privately owned houses, account for almost 60,000 houses, 58,000 to be exact.
That's just 120,000
houses. In the same period, there have been 67,000 houses reconstructed, that's rebuilt, modernised, with state and local authority assistance. That gives a total of over 180,000 houses newly built or reconstructed since 1948.
Oh, since 1948?
Yes.
Would you have a shot at the number of people who have been rehoused?
Well, taking a minimum of between 4 and 5 persons per house, it would give you roughly 500,000 people in the new houses.
Where did we get all this money?
The government, that's the state, provides all the finances to the local authorities and the bulk of the finance to private enterprise housing. That is about £150 million since 1948.
And how much does it take now to keep these people in good homes?
Well, I've been speaking of the capital investment, not the annual costs.
Yes.
In addition to the capital investment, the state pays to the local authorities at the present time a little over £2 million a year in subsidies. This is also supplemented from local revenues. And the state pays £2.5 million in grants for private housing. That's a total of state monies of about £4.5 million a year.
But isn't this burden likely to get less as time goes on?
I wouldn't think so, because the more local authority houses that are built, the annual subsidy by the state must increase. There are factors which would reduce it, but you can't budget for a fall in that, unless circumstances arise where the rents become more economic and it is no longer necessary to provide the same amount of grants. But I can't see that position at the moment.
Well, thinking of all these people who've been rehoused, where did they live before these houses were built?
Well, speaking of the local authorities programme, the local authorities have a very specific obligation on what we call slum clearance. That is to say, clearing the unfit houses in the urban and the rural areas, or the relief of overcrowding. The houses may not be unfit, but they're overcrowded. And the local authorities, the corporations principally, take 1 or 2 families out of a house that is overcrowded and regulate the number of families or people that can stay in that house.
Would it be right to think that at this moment there's a period of pause, if you like, that while the gear may not be changed, the direction is being slightly changed in relation to house building? I'm thinking of the rural areas.
It has not been deliberately changed now in the urban areas. In other words, the local authorities have really broken the back of the Urban Slum Clearance Programme. On private housing is on the increase at the present time, not on a decrease. In the rural areas, you're perfectly correct that there is a big problem that must be tackled, mainly the problem of the smallholder, the person with the uneconomic farm who has a bad house. That must be done, and steps have already been taken by the government, by the department, to carry out the necessary surveys and so on which policy will be based by the Dáil in legislation.
This new bill suggests that something like that is being done.
On the private housing side, this bill deals with that, and there has to be a second bill then dealing with local authority housing.
That's one side of the story, the past. Now we turn to the future. try to get a glimpse at what's going to happen in the building industry. I have here with me Mr. Faulkon, a well-known builder who is developing this site for 300 houses for private building purposes. Mr. Faulkon, what is the situation in the building industry just right now?
Booming, absolutely booming. We haven't had it as good ever before, possibly with the exception of immediately after the war.
Why is it booming at this moment?
Well, the demand is greater than the supply of houses, much greater.
And how does this demand arise round about this time?
There's various reasons. Possibly one reason is the expansion of Dublin, people coming from the country areas. Another reason is people coming in from the continent. Another reason is possibly the general improvement in trade, because the building industry is dependent on the prosperity of every other industry. If you have prosperity in the country, you have prosperity in the building industry.
Well, how do you see the future of the building industry at the moment? Having regard to the fact that this new bill is in the Dáil and that it does help by increasing the maximum grant to £2,000 now.
I see a very good future in the building industry. At least we hope there's a very good future, because we invested quite a lot of money in it. It will depend entirely to the extent of the general improvement in the economy of the country. If we can maintain the present boom in industry generally, the building industry will hold its own. If not, the building industry will more or less experience another slump. And first, we will be the first people to experience that slump.
Because, of course, it's sensitive to the cost of money.
The building industry as a whole is more or less a barometer. It registers. If you, in other words, we are the first people to be affected.
Well, so far as the cities are concerned, isn't the difficulty of getting sites isn't it increasing?
Well, it is. There's tremendous competition at the moment for building sites, particularly select building sites within a radius of 6 miles or so of the GPO. The prices have increased from about 1,000 an acre to about 2,500 in the last 12 months.
And of course that affects the price of a house.
It hasn't affected housing in a sense yet, to a great extent, because builders generally are selling houses at the moment on land that was bought at lower prices.
So that the bigger loan would be a benefit?
Oh, certainly. As a matter of fact, we will definitely have to have to put the increased cost of land will have to be added to the cost of the house next year, and possibly before then.
I see. Let's get back to this bill for a moment again. It produces a new grant for to encourage building single-story units for old people.
Yes.
The total of that grant between the local authority and the state would be £600.
Yes.
Would you think that would make a difference to building this type of house?
Well, it will not affect the type of house we're building at the moment. We have concentrated, or are concentrating at the moment, on the larger house for the bigger family unit, 4 and 5 bedroom house. As a matter of fact, we are only building a few 3-bedroom houses at the moment, and we find that there is a greater demand at the moment for the larger house.
Well, that's the housing story up to now. Tremendous job, fairly well done too, and a boom in the industry at the moment, and a good future expected. Surely it is the best thing that we have ever done.